we're going to talk about various levels of the mind. And our subconscious mind is basically the way the psyche is, it's divided into three basic areas. So the first area of the mind is called the primitive mind. So all of us, when we're born, we are born with certain instincts and impulses that are innate in us. So when you put a baby to the breast, the baby knows automatically how to suck. That is an innate response that we have in the primitive mind. So we're born with these things. What happens when something goes flying at your head? You duck. That's automatic. So we're born with that. And so this is the primitive mind, and about 10% of our mind power is in this part of the mind. And this part of the mind also controls the involuntary processes of the body. So those, you've just had a little breakfast and your body is digesting and going to prepare for elimination later on. Blood is circulating through your veins right now, and you are breathing without having to pay any attention. That is all going on below the level of your consciousness in your primitive mind. So the involuntary processes of the body, which are respiration, circulation, digestion, elimination, are being handled by this part, the primitive part of the mind. And this mind also controls what's called the autonomic nervous system. So we have developed somewhat from our primitive ancestors. And in the time of, let's say, the caveman or cave person, not to be PC, essentially when they faced a threat, they had one of two options. You could either stay and fight, or you could run away. So this is called the fight or flight syndrome. So what happens is that at the brainstem, going along either side of our spinal column, you have two major nerves in the body. One of them is called the sympathetic nerve, and the other one is called the parasympathetic nerve. When you are faced with something that feels dangerous and a signal is sent to your body that prepares you for one of these options. So it's going to start the adrenaline, you feel your heart beating, it's going to send out blood to the extremities so that you have the strength to either fight or to run away, and your breathing is going to be accelerated when you're facing some sort of a danger. After danger has passed, the parasympathetic nerve will send a signal to the brain and the body that all clear. And that returns the body to your normal state, which is called homeostasis. And that is where we need to spend the majority of our time in homeostasis in order to maintain optimal health. Nowadays, in a single day or in a single week, we are facing sometimes more stressors than our primitive ancestors were facing. And what happens is that when the fight or the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, or the flight or fight syndrome is activated, it is pretty much locked into a pattern that we have. So let's say you grew up with a very violent or alcoholic parent, and your father would come home and he would start yelling, and everybody would just kind of run away because they knew that you didn't want to be in his path. So that created already one of these fight or flight responses. And so as a person grows up, they leave the home, they're really not exposed to that danger of the father anymore. But let's say they're working in a company where you have a very bossy boss. And so you can have that same fight or flight response if your boss seems angry or raises his voice or her voice, or even imagining, let's say you're on your way to work and you know you're late and you were late 3 days ago and you don't want to get in trouble. Again, that would trigger that same fight or flight response. And basically, just by getting up in the morning and saying, you know what, I really have to control this because I know that it's kind of taking me over, it's not going to go away because it's just immediately triggered. It's something beyond your ability to override it. And so later on, I'm going to teach you, we're going to build on that relaxation technique that I did with you yesterday and give you what's called a control key so that you can put consciousness on a reaction that is already unconscious and not changeable on its own. And you can, when you practice this, you can break that circuit And so you're not at the mercy of these reactions that are already programmed into your mind. So when you hear people saying, you got to try to relax, or hey, don't stress out, or don't worry, be happy, that's easier said than done. Because you can understand, if something's already programmed into your subconscious mind that's going to create that fight or flight response, you can't override it just by the intention to override it. And let me explain a little bit more about how that works. So the next level of the mind is called the subconscious mind. So from the point that you are born and even conceived, because many of the regressions that I've done over the years, and have literally done thousands of them, I would say about 10 or 15% automatically go back to the prenatal state when they're in intrauterine. And so from the ages of 0 to 13, we are learning about ourselves, we're learning about the world. And we are being exposed to experience, and we are being exposed to people who influence our experience. So one level of our mind, I used to do this as cassette tapes, and you'll see that even in the book, Your Mind, the Owner's Manual, but those are like passé. So let's say we have like little jump drives, or we have little UBS ports in our minds. And so the people who are most influential in our upbringing, it's almost like they put in the little jump drive and they download their certain belief systems. So they say, for instance, children are really not born with prejudices. They learn them. So we learn what the taboos are. We learn what the prejudices are. We learn our cultural and religious belief systems from those people who are most influential, generally your parents, your grandparents, clergymen, whoever is really influential. Like I have a godchild that I was there, when she was born. So I've had obviously a lot of downloading influence on her. So these people download their belief system. So some of our programming just comes in automatically. It's like when you buy a computer that already has a certain number of programs that are already programmed into it. And that becomes just part and parcel of who you think you are. Did you ever get into an experience and you're saying something and you go, oh no, I sounded just like my mother? And you just, can't even imagine this is how it works, is because that's part of that. But the largest part of really where our subconscious programming comes in is through our interpretation of experience. This is really, really important. So as we're going through life, we are having experiences. That's part of what's being here in three-dimensional reality. And the experiences could be positive, they could be neutral, they could be negative. It is not, and this is one of the most important things I'll be able to tell you today, it's not what happened to you in your childhood. It is what you told yourself about yourself or life or the world that influences you more than anything in life. So let me say that again. It's not what happened to us as children. It's what we told ourselves. It's how we interpreted that experience that is going to create this identification in the subconscious mind. These identifications are like core belief systems. So they could be positive, they could be neutral, they could be negative. And from this core belief system comes a belief, comes attitudes, comes feelings, comes thoughts, come action, and ultimately what we experience in our life, which I'll prove to you in this diagram later on, that we create our own reality through this too.